switch me on.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Proton Pack is Not a Toy. My name is Matt. In one of my previous videos, I decided I wanted to make a motherboard for my HasLab Proton pack, and I used some clear plexiglass that I got for about $5 from Hobby Lobby, and was able to cut a decent motherboard out of it, and then had to wait for conditions to be right to paint it. And over the weekend, we had a 70-degree day, and I was able to take it outside and give it a good coat of this paint and primer black semi-gloss paint, and it came out pretty good. Before it even got an hour dry, I was going over it with an old sanding block that really didn't have much grit left on it, just to put a bunch of swirls and scratches and weathering on it, because I didn't want it to come out looking super smooth and clean. I wanted it to have that older look to it. And I'll probably have to do something to dull down the color a little bit to match the HasLab pack a little bit, but it's pretty close. And so in today's episode, I'm going to be putting it on the HasLab pack and show you how that is done. Now, before I get to that, I need to backtrack a little bit, because I've had some questions about how I'm attaching my Alice frame to my Proton pack. And without taking the motherboard off of the pack here, I'm going to use this as an example. I ran into two problems when I attached my Alice frame the first time. The first problem was, after I had the frame on the motherboard, I was unable to fit all of the screws into the holes of the actual motherboard and then tighten them down, because they were blocked in different areas by the frame itself, and so I couldn't get the screwdriver over the holes to tighten them in. Another problem was I didn't have the nuts secured on the inside of the Proton pack, and so anytime I am going to take the frame off and I pull the bolts out, then the nuts and the washers fall down inside the pack, or worse, they'll just spin around as I'm trying to unscrew the bolt, and then I can't get the bolt out. So I had to think of a way to secure the bolts, actually secure the nuts on the inside of the motherboard. That way I didn't run into that problem anymore. So I'll just show you here on this motherboard how I did it. Now, if you saw the previous video, you know I used wing nuts. I just like being able to tighten these by hand. And another advantage to using wing nuts is if you need to put tape or something over them, they have a lot more surface area to hang on to. So let's just say this is the HasLab motherboard, and this would be the back. So you take the bolt, put it through like you would expect, then put the wing nut on there, tighten it down a little bit, enough to get a good bite, about like that. Now, I line them up with the ears out to the sides, and my solution was just to get a strip of duct tape, just about a square piece, and then put it directly over the top. This is with the bolt in it, and then pinch it down over the top of the ears, and then secure it to the motherboard. Now I'm doing this very quickly and not really taking my time to make sure it's nice and clean and tight, but you can see with that up against the motherboard, now I can turn the bolt how much I need to, and the nut doesn't move. So this is just basically recreating the whole inset nut system that they have in the HasLab pack already, with the included mounting points, because I'm creating my own 2 mounting points on my pack. I needed to have the same kind of system here where I can turn this in and this one doesn't move. And so that's what I have set up on the inside of my motherboard as it sits now on the actual pack, the actual HasLab motherboard. And the benefit to that is now I'm able to take the frame off without anything falling apart on the inside or bouncing around in there. And I'm able to have the motherboard situated without anything on it. And so I'm able to put all of the included tiny screws in there. So that issue that I had before with the small screws is now gone because I'm able to take the frame on and off without having the small screws blocked by the frame itself. So that solved those two issues. I've had to try to explain that through comments and text to a couple of people, and it wasn't coming across real clearly, so I wanted to explain it here. Now that that's done, I'll show you how I'm going to put this on the pack. I do want to show you a few changes that I made to the pack that I haven't talked about before I get to adding this on there. On the washers for the 1/4-20 pan head screws that I put in, I noticed that the ones that I had on there, the 1/4-20 washers, were too big in comparison to the Phoebe pack. And so I got some M7 metric washers, and they seem to kind of be hidden mostly by the heads of the pan head screws, very similar to the Phoebe pack. So happy with the way that those looked. I got a pack of 10 and was able to change all of the ones that I added recently. Another thing on my frame itself, the neoprene never would stay with the tape and any other stuff that I tried to use, the Velcro. So I just decided to sew it up there at the bottom with some thread and a needle just by hand, and that has been holding since. So I'm very happy with the way that's finally holding up after having put it on over a year ago and not been able to get it a way that I was satisfied. So I'm happy with it now. I've already threaded my bolts and washers into the frame here, and you might notice that I have these washers taped down just a little bit so that every time I take my motherboard and frame off, those don't just fall off and I have to go find them. So those are semi-permanently held on there. I also decided not to cut an access hole for the batteries. I decided that eventually I might change over to the talent cell battery that a lot of people are putting into their packs, and they can access it through this compartment on the side. But I truly don't expect to be running the battery on this a whole lot and having to change batteries very often. So if every so often, every few months, I have to take off the frame and the motherboard to get to the battery compartment, that's not a big problem for me. I'd rather go through that than to go through having to attempt to cut a nice access panel in this and possibly screwing it up and having to start over. So that's the choice I've made on mine. You might make a different choice on yours. As you can see, I've got the 4 mounting holes already drilled out or cut out in my plexiglass here. And I did that before I painted it because it was easier to lay it on here and mark those holes while this was clear. Be a lot tougher with it being painted as it is now. So that's already done. So at this point, I just have to line everything up and tighten up the bolts. I did have a couple of places where it was a little chunky, where little parts came off. This got a little rounded off instead of coming out to a point. So eventually I might replace this and try to make a better version, but I'm pretty happy with it. I did go and, like I said, weather it a lot so that the color would be pretty similar. I'm pretty happy with the way that it looks sitting on top there. Gets a similar amount of glare, and the black isn't too far off from the plastic black that the pack is molded in. So enough talking, let's get these spacers out, line everything up, and tighten it down. I'm going to start with this top one because it's going to probably be the toughest one, just due to it being kind of blocked by the Alice frame padding here. And I'm not going to put it all the way in yet, so I have a little bit of wiggle room to get these other spacers in. Okay. I am able to kind of angle the head of this bit just enough to bite into those socket head screws. And if need be, I can tighten them up a little bit, even more with some pliers. But they're on there pretty snug. I don't want to get it over snug and then break loose the duct tape I have in there. Some people have used super glue on the nuts on the inside there with some success. Duct tape has worked for me in the past and I'm happy using it. So those are rather secure. I can pick up the pack without any real movement. Now the only thing I have to worry about is this flapping around and being loose. And I'm just going to use some double-sided clear tape. Start just in the corners and kind of tack them down, and the spots that kind of stick out a little bit, just to keep it from flapping around. Again, this is something I plan to take off every so often, so that's the reason I'm not going with a more permanent solution here. I like to have it tacked down just enough, but not so much that I can't access the inside. I'm not pressing down on the tape yet. I'm going to kind of wait till I have everything lined up where I want it, and then I'll try to stick it all at once. That way I can kind of pull it up and not have the resistance from one corner to another as I'm going around. This is something you can add as much or as little as you want. So for now, this will be it for me. I'm going to go around and just press down all along the edges. And as you can see, I can't just easily peel it up in those areas the way I could before. I need a little bit more here in the corner. There. So that about wraps it up. And as you can see, now I have a nice black motherboard. I can weather it just like I can weather the front of it. You don't see any of the tiny screw holes from the motherboard, and you don't have the giant gaping holes from the straps that we took off. And I am pretty pleased with the total look that I get from this. Again, on the bottom, there are a couple of little spots where the plexiglass broke a little bit, but it is not very evident. If you look at it from the front, you see it does kind of overlap just a little bit in some areas where I could have cut it a little bit closer. And I could always go back and trim just a little bit more. But overall, I'm very happy with the result. And if you have any questions and this is something you want to try, then feel free to leave a comment or send me an email. I'll try to walk you through it if you have any other questions. And I do have a few other things I am going to change, but I'm starting to get it rounded into form into something that I'm very happy with just leaving alone. So hope you guys enjoyed. Again, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good day. Bye.